Hello, everyone. Welcome back to English. Well, it's 3:15 or 5:15, depending, British literature. Now, as you all know, I subscribe to a responsive teaching methodology, and based upon current course performance indicators, I am updating the Unit 2 overview better support student needs. And one of the primary things I believe that we need to do is carefully look through the unit itself and read through everything. Now, I'm not going to be able to watch videos that I haven't made with you because YouTube policy prohibits me sharing the work of other videographers as an upload. So they would have blocked the upload I am creating for you right now. Let's look through this. So the thing that greets you is this origins of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Now, please note that though the videographer is entertaining and generally correct, Mary Shelley was 18, not 19, when she started Frankenstein. She developed the story, and it was published anonymously for the first time when she was 20. Uh, One of the things we also need to talk about is that this work is actually from a scholarly source, and yet that source is a little bit amiss. So let's um let's consider that for a moment, because this particular writer who's a part of this actually sponsored by a university, a reasonable looking university, uh, has done this. So Stephen Kern, let's go to the origins page. Here we have this, and it's by Stephen Kern. And when we look to see who he is, he's a fairly well regarded historian. Also, if we look at this educational institution, the Ohio State University, it seems to be a reputable institution. So we can assume that this individual is knowledgeable and that generally we could trust their work. However, even well-developed scholars can occasionally have either divergent views from the general or just get it wrong sometimes. So this is a question. How do we respond to contradictory information in the research process? Because generally speaking, the vast majority of scholars on the question of Mary Shelley would say that she started the story when she was 18 and that she was published when she was 20. Now, that technically does mean she was probably working on it when she was 19. She was writing it, but again, you have to be pretty specific. Now, if you were to not simply watch that alone and were to read all of the information in this unit that has been provided, it would be clear that there is conflict. And I recommend that we go with the general consensus perspective rather than the idiosyncratic one in this case. So, who was Mary Shelley? Well, Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley was born on August 30th, 1797, an English novelist, short story writer, dramatist, essayist, biographer, and travel writer. She is best known for her novel Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus, but her life and other works are equally fascinating. Now, here are some key aspects of Mary Shelley's life and career. Early life and influences. Parents. Mary was the daughter of a philosopher and political writer, William Godwin, and famed feminist Mary Wollstonecraft, who was the author of A Vindication of the Rights of Women. Sadly, her mother died shortly after her birth. Education. Mary Shelley received an advanced education for a girl of her time, largely self-directed through her father's extensive library. Her father's intellectual circle included many prominent figures of the day, exposing her to important ideas and debates. Personal life. Percy Bysshe Shelley uh, was the love of her life. And at the age of 16, she began a relationship with the at that time already married poet Percy Bysshe Shelley. They eloped in 1814, facing social ostracism and financial hardship. So it was not an easy time for them. There were family tragedies in Mary's life as well, numerous personal tragedies, including the loss of her mother, three of her four children, and her husband, who drowned in 1822. Widowhood and later years. After Percy's death, Mary Shelley lived as a professional writer to support herself and her son. She faced criticism and social challenges due to the unconventional life choices that she had made. uh, Literary career in Frankenstein. She was just 18. When Frankenstein was published, she was 20. So she wrote when she was 18, published when she was 20, and it is considered her masterpiece. It was initially published anonymously in 1818. Other works. Shelley wrote other novels, including The Last Man, Valperga, and The Door. He's also penned short stories, essays, biographies, and again, travel narratives. Editing Percy Shelley's work was another part of what she did. She devoted much of her later life to editing and promoting Percy Shelley's poetry and preserving his place in literary history. Legacy. She is considered a feminist icon. Mary Shelley is often celebrated as a feminist icon. Her mother's feminist writing and her own experiences in a male dominated society influenced her views and writings. Culturally, the cultural influence of her work, particularly Frankenstein, has had a lasting impact on literature, inspiring numerous adaptations and interpretations. Recognition. Initially overshadowed by her husband's fame, Mary Shelley's contribution to literature, especially in the genres of science fiction and horror, have been increasingly recognized and celebrated, whereas Percy Bysshe Shelley has been increasingly less recognized and celebrated. The times in which Mary Shelley lived were not especially supportive of women. When Frankenstein was first published anonymously in 1818, there was considerable speculation about the identity of the author. Many readers and critics initially believed that Percy Bysshe Shelley, Mary Shelley's husband, was the author of the novel. This belief was fueled by several factors. Percy Shelley's pre-existing literary reputation. Percy Shelley was already a well-known poet and intellectual figure at the time. His established reputation in literary circles made it plausible to many that he would or could have written such a work. The preface. The preface to the first edition of Frankenstein was written by Percy Shelley, uh, which further contributed to the confusion regarding authorship. Literary style, and themes. Some readers and critics noted similarities in themes and styles of Frankenstein to Percy Shelley's own works, but these perceived similarities supported the belief that he was the author. Gender assumptions. The literary world of the 19th century was heavily male dominated, and it was uncommon for women to be recognized as authors of such serious and philosophical works as Frankenstein constitutes. So, consequently, many assumed that a man must have written Frankenstein. It wasn't until the publication of the second edition in 1823 that Mary Shelley was credited as an author in an English edition. And I'm saying that because um, some sources point out a French translation of the work from 1821 that has, Madame Shelley listed as the author. The challenge to this is tracking it down. When I was a student, it was fairly easy. We would go to the library and gather some books and there you have it. The books were often vetted by respected sources. You could check what publisher had put the book forth. And if it was a good publisher or if it was a university press, you felt assured that it was a source that was honored in academia. These days, it's a little more difficult for better or worse. I mean, back then, what's the downside to having sources be centralized in the works of books? Well, it takes a lot of time for publication to actually take place in that medium, but also you have a very select, closed, not especially inclusive group of individuals deciding what knowledge is, what information is, and what constitutes important information. Now we have an opportunity for more voices to be present, which is excellent with the internet. But we have so many voices, sometimes it's difficult to tell what is true, real, actual, factual, and what is not. Fact checking is increasingly important. Plus, again, you'll have an occasional difference of opinion between scholars, and that can also be challenging, in which case you've got to exercise your own judgment um, to a certain extent, but you've got to be able to support that judgment. All the same, in the information age, the having a solid trifecta of information that corroborates one another is challenging and difficult. You can prove or disprove most things. That means that as scholars, our work is definitely cut out for us. All right, so let's continue with this. So she was credited finally in an English edition in 1823. And this helped dispel the earlier misconceptions about Percy Shelley's authorship. But please note for the purposes of this course, we are using the 1831 version of Frankenstein. And I have actually updated the link. I usually in the past have let students choose, but I have updated our links so that there's a very specific version of Frankenstein online that I am recommending we use. Um, okay, so um, however, even after her name was attached to the novel, some critics still continued to suggest that Percy had a significant hand in its writing, a claim that has been largely discredited by modern scholarship, which recognizes Mary Shelley's independent authorship and style. So ultimately, what we could say in summation is that Mary Shelley's life was marked by both brilliance and tragedy. Her enduring legacy as a writer and intellectual reflects her remarkable resilience and talent in the face of many challenges she bravely and boldly confronted. Okay, so about the readings. Yes, I think I'm just going to go all through this. So we have a section that's about the readings themselves, and then we have a section that's a clarification about class and context. Then I'm going to come back up to our to-do list again, and our supplemental videos, and then again remind everyone of this definite link to an online version. Although you still have latitude on the version you choose. Again, I'm recommending the 1831 version. We have Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley is renowned for her novel Frankenstein and the actual timeline, a more detailed timeline of events that could be very helpful in the exam process. Okay, so yeah, I think actually let's do this entirety of this right hand column as I look at it. So in the to-do list, we have to remember to read Frankenstein in its entirety, the entire book. Watch the supplemental videos, keeping in mind again that there's a difference of opinion on this, and that the majority opinion is that she was 18 when she started, not 19, and that she was published anonymously for the first time when 20. All right, we have the complete unit exam. Uh, Again, go through this information and read the entire book before taking the exam. Refer to the unit content information as you take the exam. Draft term paper. So there's information here about the term paper assignment. You should watch that most definitely. And then if you wish to, please visit and contribute to the Padlet discussion. There is a Padlet sharing board which students may contribute to. Here are our supplemental videos. There's one about, they're both from the National Theater, when the National Theater did a filmic staging of that play, of the book. They turned it into a play, and it's quite an interesting project that they did. Uh, we have here also then that link again to the version that I'm recommending. And we have a timeline of her life. So let's look at the timeline highlighting key events in Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley's life. 1797, she is born on August 30th in London as Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin. She is the daughter of the philosopher William Godwin and feminist writer Mary Wollstonecraft, who died shortly after Mary's birth. In 1814, at age 16, she begins a romantic relationship with the poet Percy Bysshe Shelley, who is already married. They elope to Europe, facing social ostracism upon their return. 1815, Mary gives birth to a daughter who dies shortly after. This is followed by the birth of a son, William, in 1816. Also in 1815, the eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia in April 1815 leads to a volcanic winter globally, causing 1816 to be known as the year without a summer. This unusual climactic event results in cold, wet weather across Europe in the summer of 1816. Okay. 1816, May, June, Mary Shelley travels with Percy Bysshe Shelley to Geneva, Switzerland, where they meet Lord Byron and his physician, John Polidori. The inclement weather keeps them indoors, leading discussions on various subjects, including galvanism, the occult, and the nature of life. In 1816, June 16, inspired by these discussions and a challenge by Lord Byron to write a ghost story, Mary Shelley conceives of the idea of Frankenstein in a dream. This occurs after an evening of reading German ghost stories translated into French in the book Phantasmagoria or Goriana. Apologies. All right. 1816 summer, Mary Shelley begins writing Frankenstein during the summer of Geneva in Geneva. Her initial short story is encouraged by Percy Shelley to be expanded into a full novel. Again, encouraged by Percy Shelley, not written by Percy Shelley. 1817, over the course of the year, Shelley continues, that's Mary Shelley, continues to refine and expand her manuscript. So, yep, she's working on it when she's 19. But in 1818, Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus is published anonymously. It gains immediate popularity and critical acclaim. Now, the first edition was published by Langton, Hughes, Harding, Mavor, and Jones in a 3-volume format, commonly known as a triple decker. This mode of publication was typical for contemporary fiction of the day. 1818 March, the first reviews of Frankenstein begin to appear in the British magazines. The novel garners attention and speculation about its anonymous author. 1819, her daughter Clara dies in September, and in June 1819, her son William dies. These tragedies deeply affect Mary. 1822, Percy Shelley dies in a boating accident, leaving Mary a widow at age 24. 1823, she returns to England with her surviving child, Percy Florence Shelley. Uh, in 1823, she also has a second edition of Frankenstein published in 2 volumes by G. and W.B. Whitaker in London. This edition attributes Mary Shelley as the author, marking the first time her name appears in association with the novel. Apart from, in English, apart from um, this 1821 version that I have heard speculation about. Okay, so 1826, Mary experiences severe financial difficulties but continues to write and publish. 1831, a significantly revised and edited version of Frankenstein is published by Henry Coburn and Richard Bentley. This edition includes an extensive introduction by Mary Shelley, where she discusses the novel's origins and her motivations for writing it. This is the version that is most widely read today, and the one that we're probably going to also look at in this overview. In 1835 to 1840, she publishes several more novels, including Masked Man and Lador. In 1844, she oversees the publication of Percy Shelley's posthumous poems. In 1851, Mary Shelley dies on the 1st of February at the age of 53. So not terribly old. I mean, I'm not saying that was especially young at the time that she passed, but by our standards, that's a fairly short life. Mary Shelley's life was a blend of tremendous literary success and profound personal losses. Her works continue today to be celebrated for its innovation and yeah, small typo there. We'll have to correct. You usually see them when you're presenting work. Let's come back here to talk about the reading. So, Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus, written by Mary Shelley, is a novel that combines elements of the Gothic and Romantic literary traditions and is often cited as one of the earliest examples of science fiction. Its narrative style follows the popular epistolary fiction tradition. Here are some key aspects of the book and its place in the science fiction genre. First of all, I would argue that it is the origination of the science fiction genre. Although, because I also would argue Mary Shelley is a woman, it's hard to get the still rather male chauvinistic uh, establishment of languages and literature in the world, English scholarship and academe to acknowledge this fact. Um, okay, let's go look at some key aspects of the book. Overview of Frankenstein plot. The story is told through a series of letters from an explorer, Robert Wilton, to his sister, Wilton recounts the tale of Victor Frankenstein, a young scientist who creates a grotesque but sentient creature in an unorthodox scientific experiment. It's actually a framic medium. We have the story book-ended within this knowledge of Robert Walton having found the work. Themes Frankenstein explores themes such as the dangers of unchecked scientific ambition, the ethical limits of experimentation, quest for knowledge, and the nature of humanity, and the consequences of isolation and abandonment. Structure of the novel is notable for its frame, narrative structure, with Walton's letters encompassing Victor's story, which in turn encompasses the creature's story. This layered storytelling adds depth and multiple perspectives to the narrative. Characterization. The creature, often mistakenly called Frankenstein, Frankenstein is actually the scientist, not the creature, is a deeply complex character. Um, his initial innocence, subsequent misery, and quest for belonging and revenge raise profound ethical and philosophical questions. Is Frankenstein, excuse me, the malingering cold that I've had since the start of term, is Frankenstein the first work of science fiction? What do you think? Debate. There is an ongoing debate among literary scholars about what constitutes the first work of science fiction. Frankenstein is often cited as a foundational text due to its innovative use of scientific ideas and its exploration of the consequences of scientific and technological advancement. And I would agree with that. Again, it seems to be difficult that as much progress has been made, we can still view the traditional canon of English literature as quite narrow and non-inclusive in its expression. And so, but we're making headway, and I believe that we're soon to come to a time when it is generally acknowledged that Mary Shelley is the beginning of the originator, the creator of the science fiction genre. Influence, regardless of whether it is the first, Frankenstein has had a profound and lasting impact on the genre of science fiction. It opened the door for subsequent works that blend scientific concepts with imaginative storytelling, a hallmark of the genre. Legacy, cultural impact. Frankenstein has become a part of popular culture, inspiring countless adaptations in theater, film, television, and other media. Now, the image of the mad scientist and the motif of a creature created by science gone awry have become deeply ingrained in public imagination. Interpretations. The novel has been interpreted in various ways, including a commentary on the Industrial Revolution, a reflection on the consequences of parental neglect, and an exploration of what it means to be human. In summary, Frankenstein is not only a groundbreaking novel in its own right, but also a seminal work in science fiction genre, influencing how science and innovation are explored in literature. Its themes and narrative structure have made it a subject of study and admiration for over 2 centuries. All right. Now, this is a bit of a codicil from our last unit. It seemed to me that I had not done a sufficient job in sharing with students what class in the context of British culture means. So, a clarification, what is class in context? Um, One thing I do not believe I have been clear about, as perhaps I should be, or as clear about as I should be, as the coordinator of this course, is the issue of class consciousness and what class means in British culture as opposed to American culture. First of all, basic difference between British and all European culture from American culture is the concept of aristocracy, the divine right of kings, as it is often called. The basis of English society is a belief in a Christian concept of God with a monarchical government led by a king or queen that has been chosen by God via the blessing of their ancestral bloodline to rule. Relatives of this bloodline form a part of the aristocracy, and the aristocracy own all the land. There is the aristocracy, and there are commoners. And I'll be saying this again as I read through this passage, but there's nothing in between. And the commoners tend to be equated as that which is a part of the land, whereas the aristocracy are the rulers and owners of the land and therefore the people. It is not by generally current standards anywhere in Europe or or the United States. Uh, it isn't common for that belief to be held. Even notions of aristocracy and what that means have changed by our current standards. However, at the time of the books we're reading, um, in the traditional canon, it's still in place. And to a greater or lesser extent, psychologically, these issues still exist in Britain. So the aristocracy is the ruling land-owning class. It is also possible to become a part of the aristocracy by marriage and by appointment. Generally speaking, though, one could not buy their way into aristocracy. And if you are not a member of the aristocracy, you are a commoner. Traditionally, there was no middle ground. You are a part of the ruling class, some level of the ruling landowning class, or you are a commoner. Commoners do not own land. Only the aristocracy own land, traditionally speaking. Again, this is not about money. Aristocracy is about blood and property and land. You might be a very wealthy commoner, but unless you have some noble blood in your veins, you are still considered in traditional British culture a commoner. Also, traditionally, all the land that was owned by the aristocracy that was a part of it all all of the land was owned by the aristocracy. That was part of it all, the whole system. Let me rephrase that. Sorry. The notion that God determined who had dominance and nobility was in place. So this is the idea that God has decided who the aristocracy are, and they own everything. And you need to abide by God's will, essentially. So at that time in traditional British culture, that was a belief. And that belief was also the basis of laws of that era. Under such conditions, commoners and aristocracy did not get married to one another since marriage was about brokerage, alliances of land, authority, and power. In Pride and Prejudice, Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet are both of noble blood. Both are part of the structure of aristocracy. So technically, Jane Austen is not writing about class struggle. Yes, there are different levels of status in aristocracy, but there is only one class of aristocracy. And the only other class, again, is common and non-landowning. In Great Expectations, however, Dickens is taking the class structure to task. He is making a comment about uh, having this aristocracy class and this commoners class and what that does to the human condition. He's making observations about that for the reader to consider. Americans really have nothing to compare to this. We are all about merit and money. It makes it quite difficult at times to understand British literature, the traditional canon and culture. Um, I think at times. Apologies that I did not explicate this more fully in Unit 1. I have given half credit on question 1 of the unit exam to compensate. And again, if you ever have questions about anything in this work, I would ask you contact me and truly to email me. And again, you can find that email over here under Meet Your Instructor or on the main page. So please do not hesitate to contact me. Um, I am going to again continue with a responsive approach, and I believe that our future exam processes in Unit 3 and 4 and 5 will be a little bit more balanced between essay, in which you are able to explicate via essay, uh, rather than simply the conventional forms of do you know the facts? And I believe that that will be supportive of different learning styles. Again, if you have questions, please do contact me. I look forward to reading from you. And again, in each unit, it is critical that you read very carefully through the materials, very carefully indeed. Thank you so much for your time and attention.